Thank you so much for your incredible response on the last video. I love hearing how many of you are embracing the Dolce Vita. Last time I showed how slowing down and embracing the Dolce Vita can really transform your life. Today I'm going to take it a step further and teach you La Pasta Frolla. This is an easy, quick, and authentic Italian recipe that has been made for generations. This specific recipe has actually been provided by my mentor and dear friend Luciana at the Panificio, and I cannot wait to share it with you. As I mentioned, my journey began as an apprentice at a local bakery here in Napoli. But what I learned was so much more than just baking. I learned how to slow down, how to be more present, how to really connect with the local community. Those skills can be applied everywhere, no matter where you are in the world. I also began hosting in-person experiences at the bakery where I teach both locals and tourists, and I'm gonna teach you one of the classes that I teach at the bakery. Buongiorno amici! Today we are starting La Pasta Frolla section. This is short crust pastry. Short crust pastry. So with the short crust pastry, it's super easy. You're just going to need flour tipo 00. If you can't find 00, you can use all-purpose. Un po' di sale, a little bit of salt, eggs, a little bit of sugar, and butter. My butter is cold and it's cut up on a plate. With the short crust pastry, you can make biscotti, cookies, la crostata, jam tarts, and many other things. Ready? Let's begin. Let's begin by mixing our ingredients. Throw in your sugar. You can also do this at home with a whisk. Throw in our eggs. Ooh, a little bit of burro, butter. Close. Give it a whirl. Once that's more or less combined, let's add in our flour. And un po' di sale. If you want, optional, you can add a little bit of lemon zest or a little bit of vanilla for added flavor. Honestly, in the bakery, we don't do that. We just keep it plain old simple, plain Jane. So that's what I'm gonna do. Close it, mix. So flour your hands. And roll your dough onto your surface. Now, depending on environmental conditions, on the humidity in the air, the warmth, the flour, your dough might be perfect and ready to use, or it might be a little too warm. So if you're feeling like it's a little bit too warm or too wet, you can add a bit more flour, and you can also put it in the fridge for an hour until it's ready to use. A good way to think about this is if you've ever baked gingerbread cookies, you want your dough to be a similar texture as the gingerbread cookies. My dough is looking perfect, so I'm gonna go ahead and start rolling it out. That was super quick, right? So now, prepare your work surface for la crostata. We have a cutting board, flour it, get a pie tin, butter it, get a bowl of flour out because you'll need this to keep your hands and your work surface clean and floured. An egg for an egg wash. A marmalade or jam of your choice because this is a jam tart after all. Rolling pin. I find having a spatula is helpful for getting the jiggly jam out. A paintbrush for the egg wash. This dooley McBob rolling pastry cutter. It's like a mini pizza cutter, but cuter. And of course, your dough. So I have the half of my dough. Work surface is nice and floured. Hands are floured. Rolling pin is floured. Oven should be preheated to 356 degrees Fahrenheit, 180 degrees Celsius. And let's start rolling. We want to roll our dough to a nice thin layer, like a pie crust. It's going to be the width of this. So start to work in opposite directions. We want to make a nice, flat, somewhat circular pie crust shape. We don't want it to get too thin where it's ripping. It's kind of getting a little bit thin on this side for me. I am going to roll it onto my mallet because it's getting stuck to the bottom of the surface. So we don't want that. And let's put some flour onto the surface and then unravel onto my cutting board. I know I said my dough is perfect, but now that I'm working on it, it is looking a little bit on the warm side. So I'm pressed for time because I have limited sunlight while I'm recording. But if you do have time, I do recommend if you leave your dough in the fridge for like 30 minutes, an hour, it'll be a lot easier to work with. But we can do this. Okay, keep rolling it out. I'm pretty satisfied with the thickness of this. As you can see, it's quite thin. And now I'm going to roll the dough back onto my rolling pin. Place the pie tin in front of it, and then slowly and carefully, we're going to roll our dough, our flour, into the pie crust. And then gently push it into the crust, into the tin, with your hands. And then it'll just kind of naturally break off. Or you can peel it apart with your hands. So we have a little bit of a wall, and we will make that wall more smooth after we put the lattice on. Okay, so the most important part is that the bottom of your pie crust is covered. You have the walls. If there are any holes, any buchi as we like to call them in Italian, you can just fill them with a little bit of dough. It's okay if the bottom isn't beautiful because you're gonna cover it with jam. So with this other dough, let's make it into a ball, put it to the side because that's gonna be our lattice. And now let's pour our jam in. Now, popular jam flavors are frutti di bosco, which is a berry type jam, fruits of the forest. Then there is albicocca, which is apricot. That's a nice jam filling. Ciliegia, cherry is delicious, black cherry. So today, because it's autumn, I'm doing an apple crostata, una crostata di mela. It's clumpy like this, no worries, just be patient. Start to press it with your spoon. And our goal is to make a nice, even layer of filling. And because it's fall here, and I love apples and I love spices, I'm putting a little bit of cinnamon on top of mine. Just a dash. And I also like cinnamon because it lowers the glycemic index of sweets. Fun fact. All right. Now let's work on our lattice. Once again, flour your surface. Flour the dough. flour your rolling pin. And once again, we want to roll it out in a thin layer around the same width as our pie crust. We don't want it too thin because otherwise it'll rip and be hard to put on top of the crust, but we do want it fairly thin. So I'm just working over the edges that seem to be thicker. Woo, get back down there. All right, let's see. That looks pretty good to me. So now using our cutter, start to cut horizontal strips. Now looking at this, I think it would be better if I did my strips this way. So I'm going to cut strips that are the width of 2 of my fingers. Granted, I have quite thin fingers, so it might even be the width of 1 finger for you. Now, we are going to bring our crostata nice and close and start to place your lattice on top of it. I like to start in the middle with the longest one and then pinch it into the crust, into the sides. And then I take a slightly smaller one and we'll put it in the middle between the edge and this piece here. And then one more time with one that's slightly thinner or slightly shorter. Now let's do the opposite direction, starting with the middle. But we're not going 90 degrees here. We go at a slight angle. It's artsier that way. Più belle. And then again with this side. Pinching it in as you go. And right here. I'm pleased with that. Now we need to make it shaped. So I like to use my rolling cutter and I go on the inside of the edge and remove the excess. And now let's start to press. We're going to make a little bit of a wall. And as we press, I'm using both hands. I'm using my thumb on my left hand and my middle finger on my right. So I'm pushing down and I'm pushing against the wall to make a kind of thicker rim, so to speak. Because this is our crust. And this is what attaches the lattice to the crust. So now I have my crostata. You may have seen that as I was going around the edge to make my crust, in the areas that were thin, I was adding in a little bit of the excess dough. Now to make this decorative, take the back of a fork and press the back of the fork along the crust so that we get a nice little ruffled edge. Ta-da! And the final part is to add an egg wash. I have 1 egg with a little bit of yolk here. Mix it. This is to get the nice gold coat onto our crostata. We're doing this right before putting the crostata in the oven. So my oven is already preheated, ready to go. Put it all over the whole crostata. I try to avoid the jammy layers, and I just want to get it on the pastry. So now let's put our crostata in the oven, in the middle rack, close it, and we'll set a timer for 20 minutes. It will most likely take 20 to 25 minutes. Our objective is to get a nice golden coat around the crostata, and we want the inside to look baked too. When you check it, be careful because your jam is going to melt and get hot and bubbly. So you don't want to tilt your crostata in any way. You have to be careful to keep it flat so that the jam doesn't spill out and get on top of the lattice. So I'll see you in 20 minutes. Here we have my crostata. We are going to let it cool completely because we want the jam inside to be solidified so that when we cut it, the jam doesn't ooze out into the other layers. It just stays like a nice solid hunk. So leave that to the side and give yourself a pat on the back. It is the morning and we have a piece of crostata. As you can see, the jam is all nice and solidified, and this is gonna be delicious with a little espresso or a cup of tea. I know that life can be busy and stressful, but making la pasta frolla only takes a few moments, and from there you can make so many amazing things. Also, the act of slowing down in the kitchen is incredibly calming. Worried you can't find Italian ingredients? It's all good. The recipes that I use only use very simple ingredients that you can find at most local grocery stores. But for example, la doppia zero flour, you can either substitute that with all-purpose flour, or you can get 00 flour on Amazon or a local Italian market near you. If you're worried that you're not a great baker, that's okay. These recipes are fairly simple and I'm here to guide you. You can also email me with any questions you might have. In the next video, I'm going to introduce you to some of the other members of our classic Italian baking community, and I'm going to answer the top questions that I've received this week. I would love to know, how did your cookies turn out? And who did you share them with? So let me know by either emailing me a photo and giving me a little update, or you can also tag me in a story on Instagram at Amby. All right, a presto, ciao ciao.